presentation. Now we'll request Mr. Tim Schittekatte, who will basically be talking about the exchange in EU. And now that we had a presentation on how the Indian market functions, and the differences also were highlighted, so we can relate it how does the European market function vis-a-vis our market.
Hello everybody, I'm Tim Schittekatte from the Florence School of Regulation. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Also thank you Andries for already introducing the Florence School of Regulation, so that's already clear who we are and what we do. So I will talk about the EU day-ahead electricity market. First, to put things into perspective, similar as this previous speaker has done, the day-ahead market is just one of the many markets we have in Europe. If electricity is delivered to your house, you know that you need more than just electrical energy. You also need a network, and you also need a secure operation. So there are different components to electricity, being energy, transmission capacity, reserves, and flexibility. It's possible to have different markets for these different components, which we do in certain time segments, but not in other ones. So going from far behind, from several years, I think we have forward energy markets with contracts like 4 year ahead, 5 year ahead maximum, mostly only 1 year ahead. We have forward cross-zonal transmission markets to hedge between different bidding zones, because these forward energy markets, they are set on the price within a bidding zone. I will go back to bidding zones after. Then we have this closer to real time, like from 1 year ahead to about 1 day ahead, we can have balancing capacity markets, which is reserving capacity for balancing. And then closer to real time, we have the most important ones, the short-term coupled energy markets, the day-ahead market and the intraday market. I will talk about the day-ahead market, and after Christian will talk about the intraday market. After comes balancing, real-time balancing. So as already been said by the previous speaker, in Europe we have this decentralized self-commitment market, which means that there's no central dispatch. Generators and buyers, they do certain commitments in terms of energy injection and withdraw, and they can choose themselves whether they deliver it or whether they buy and sell it in the market. So it's a kind of voluntary market. So what I want to explain today is how this coupling is going on, because I think that's the most interesting feature from the European day-ahead market today. So first key concept, bidding zones, then I talk about integration, and then I talk about the challenges we have with integrating day-ahead markets. Bidding zones. So as already explained, in the EU we have this, we call it zonal market, which is based on bidding zones, which means similar as in India, I've just learned there are 13 bidding zones today. In the EU we have also several bidding zones, which mostly are the same as national boundaries. So what happens within a bidding zone is, from a kind of electrical engineering perspective, the market neglects all transmission capacity within a bidding zone. Only the transmission capacity between different bidding zones gets priced. That's the idea. So that's where markets and grids are linked in this concept of bidding zones. So how do bidding zones look like in Europe today? They look more or less like the same map you found in your geography class years before, except there's several exceptions. So Italy, they have several bidding zones. Also in the Nordics, Norway has 5, Sweden has 4. All the rest, it's more or less the country is equal to the bidding zone. Except Germany used to be one bidding zone with Austria and Luxembourg, which was split just 1 year ago. And this was a very politically sensitive decision. So which means that at day ahead, there's one electricity price per hour per country. That's the idea. So if you look at these national bidding zones, these are several important characteristics. So per country, there can be one or multiple power exchanges. So just as in India, in some countries, there is competition among power exchanges possible. For example, France, Germany. In other countries, power exchanges are monopolies. So power exchanges, their core business is the interface with the traders and the settlement. The pricing algorithm themselves is not done by a separate power exchange, but is done by all power exchanges together. So that's important to distinguish that. So in the day-ahead market, which takes place the day before at noon, you have actually an auction for all the next hours of the next day. So products are 1 hour, not 15 minutes as in India. We're trying to go to 15 minutes, but that's not happening today. We have price caps. I mean, price caps are not relevant that much anymore in the EU. Now they're even dynamic. So that means that if the price is coming close to a price cap, then the price cap will go up. The reason that there are price caps is purely to let the algorithm converge, and if one trader would put a zero too much to his bid in order to block it. So it's purely administratively. So there are also price floors. We see sometimes negative prices in EU, especially because of renewables and some kind of renewable feed-in schemes. As already mentioned, we have simple bids, but also block bids and all kind of exotic variants to block bids, which kind of make the algorithm more difficult to converge because they're computationally more complex. So this is the national kind of picture. If we look at volumes, similar as the previous colleague already pointed out, we see that, for example, let's say the German market, point C, we see that about a medium, like let's say average in the year, we have a share of the consumption which goes through the day-ahead market of around 40–50%. You see at certain hours in the year, close to all consumption goes to day-ahead, other hours less. What we also see is over the years, the volumes which go through the day-ahead, they vary a bit. On average, there's no clear sign whether it goes up or down. It's a bit stable depending on the countries. You also see that it differs a lot in countries. France, for example, maybe 15% goes to day ahead. Otherwise, there's OTC, there's out of the market long-term contracts. And you see that, okay, the volume can go up and down. In intraday, on the other hand, we see a clear rise of volume. So that's important there. So there is a shift going on from where day ahead used to be really the reference market. Now intraday becomes more important. That has, of course, to do with renewables. Day ahead was made because it took about 1 day for a coal plant to switch on and off, which become more and less important in the future when renewables who need to react closer to real time. But my colleague will talk about intraday. So integration at the day ahead market. So what does it mean, or why do we do it, first of all? Because this has been going on since, I think, early 2000s, that we want to integrate electricity markets over in Europe, which means we want to let electricity freely flow from up in the north, Finland, to down in the south, Portugal. So why do we do this? Of course, because we want to make use of efficient use of our resources. We have a lot of hydro in the north, Norway, have a lot of sun in the south, a lot of nuclear in France. And also, not only the generation mix differs among the countries, but also the demand patterns. So some countries have peaks at other moments. For example, France, there's electrical heating, while other countries, they're completely gas heating. So you see that there's an uncorrelated demand, and if you couple markets, then you can make use of these kind of pooling effects. Another important reason is security of supply. We are stronger together than on our own. And a very important one is to reduce market powers. So by having coupled markets, one of the issues which we faced in the beginning of the liberalization in Europe was that within one country there were only very few players. But by coupling different markets, we were able to get more players fighting against each other to drive prices down. So that was a major drive for this market coupling. And renewables, of course, they benefit from all these factors. So by renewables, of course, they are very different according to the location. And for security of supply, we might have more or different needs. So therefore, to allow for a cost-efficient integration of renewables, integration is also an important component to deal with that. So how do we do that? We do this kind of market coupling, market splitting, which means that the TSOs about just, oh, what is this? Something happened. So I will just talk. So the TSOs, they decide, they give to the exchanges the amount of capacity between the different zones. And then these capacities, they are used in the market algorithm. When the trading resolves into congestion between different zones, the zones are split, so the prices can differ between the different zones. when there's no congestion between different bidding zones, when there's no congestion between the links between the zones, the prices are equal. So there is no kind of transport fee or transmission fee or whatsoever. It's purely depending on whether there is congestion or not. Markets are split or coupled. Okay. Yeah. So how do we allocate this transmission capacity? In the past, not so long ago, we did explicit allocation of transmission capacity. What does that mean? If a trader wants to produces energy in bidding zone A and wants to sell it to country B or bidding zone B, it has to sell the energy and it has to buy a transmission right. This is called explicit allocation. You buy it in two different markets. What we do now is implicit allocation. It's the algorithm itself which takes care of energy and transmission at the same time. So how is this done? This is called this implicit. It's called implicit allocation, market coupling. They are synonyms. It's the same thing. So it's a smart algorithm where the transmission capacities and the trades are brought together, and the algorithm decides on which trades use which capacity in the most cost-efficient way. So the traders don't have to go to two different markets anymore, and there is no coordination issue between, I thought that energy would flow from country A to B, so I bought it right in that direction, but actually it flowed the other way around in real time, so therefore I kind of bought it for no reason. That doesn't happen anymore because now it's done together in this implicit allocation. So where is this market coupling happening today? So here you can see the map as it is today in Europe. So day-ahead markets goes from like Finland, Estonia, to Portugal and Italy. What does that mean? If there is no congestion in the network at a certain point in time, a certain hour, maybe this hour, the energy price can be the same between Finland and Portugal all the way in the tip. The moment that there are congestions between the links, between the bidding zones, the prices will differ and energy will flow from cheap to expensive regions. So now Ireland in blue and Greece in blue, they are reforming their markets, and I think we can already color Ireland today green. So this is going really fast. And then there's some markets outside of the EU or on the periphery who are getting there within the next years. So challenges with integration. Is this working? This is a graph which shows per region how much the prices converge. So how much of the time there is no congestion between two bidding zones and we see the same prices. For example, this core, CWE, is France, Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands, and maybe Austria also today. So you see that in 2017, around 40% of the time, the price was the same in France, Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany. And then the other hours it was different. And you see some regions, for example, Nordics. Okay, Nordics is not doing that well anymore, but Baltics, they're doing very good. CWE as well. Other regions, EU is Ireland and UK, there's almost no convergence going on. So if this graph would show everywhere 100%, it wouldn't be very good neither, because that would mean that we have a huge network which is highly overbuilt. So where do we want that number? Maybe a bit higher than it is today, especially in particular regions, because there is a trade-off between having prices converge and investing into very expensive big networks, which the public is not always that happy with to build these days. So what is the main issue? What is underlying of this convergence not going that good in certain regions? It has to do with this tweet. So this is a graph which was very controversial in Europe 2 years ago. It shows the amount of capacity, so the proportion of the thermal capacity of these cross-zonal links, which is allocated to the market. So you see that in some regions, I think on average, 28% of the thermal capacity of the lines, of the physical lines, was allocated to the market. That's not very much. We would expect that, okay, we don't want to allocate 100% of the thermal capacity to the market because we need some margin for security and whatsoever. There are some kind of flows which we cannot allocate to the market. But only 28% is extremely low. So the issue is not necessarily that there are bottlenecks in terms of grids, but the issue is that not all the capacity that there is available is offered to the market. And that's what Europe is challenging today. So how can we solve this? You see HVDC is not really an issue. So how can we solve this? There are three different ways of solving this issue, which we're dealing with right now. One is a better coordination in the transmission capacity calculation between these bidding zones. So transmission calculation is done by a national TSO, but they don't necessarily talk with a TSO next door. So there's an issue of figuring out how much capacity we need for security, how much can we allocate to the market. So now we're doing, in some regions it's already implemented, is flow-based market coupling, which means that instead of TSOs who are saying, for tomorrow between Belgium and Netherlands we have 500 megawatt, and between Belgium and France we have 300 megawatt of capacity, they say, we give you a domain, and depending on where the market chooses, we allocate the capacity where the market wants to flow. So it's not a kind of an ex ante decision of the transmission capacity per line. It's we say this is how our network looks like, and now it's over to the market to distribute the flows among the lines. So we're not going to decide before which line will have what capacity, because they're interdependent. So therefore, this flow-based market coupling can result in better allocation of transmission capacity. Another super politically sensitive point is a better alignment of markets and physical reality, which means we need to reconfigure the bidding zones. 10 years ago, a country was not really that congested within the borders, but mostly between the borders, which was okay, a legacy. What happened with renewables is there's a lot of renewables being installed within the countries, which results of a lot of flows and a lot of congestion now within the countries. But the countries remain one bidding zone, which means that this copper plate assumption is not true anymore, which means that therefore the TSO has to deal with many congestions within the market, which are within the country, which are not priced, wherefore they have less capacity they can offer to the cross-border trading, because they use the cross-border trading as a way to limit their internal congestion. So there's a misalignment of incentives between national TSOs and the European benefit. And one way to solve this is these bidding zones, but that would mean that within one country, for example Germany, there would be 2 or 3 prices a day ahead, which is something symbolic, which is something which is not appreciated by many stakeholders. Even though from a purely energy economics cost efficiency point of view, that would be the way to go, and I'm glad to hear that in India it's easier than for us. Another one, a third option to do, is to just invest more in transmission lines, but as already said, we have the hardware, so why not better use it instead of building new ones, which are very expensive and which are not also very politically acceptable. And this is exactly what this 4th package, which was already mentioned by the speaker from the European Commission, is pushing for. So in the 4th package, there are new rights given to the European Commission to discuss about this bidding zone review. And even this graph, where it says 28%, in the future, each TSO is legally obliged to offer 70% of a benchmark, so about 50% of the physical capacity to the market. So it's legally obliged. And if it cannot do that, it has to split the zones. That's more or less simplistic what this 4th package, which has been approved just a couple of months ago, has within its text. So this is really where we're tackling right now. And if you want to know more about how everything works in Europe, as Andries already said, we are doing courses about this. So we have these European network codes, which actually govern this European market integration from forward to real time, but mostly focused on day ahead and intraday. So within these courses, which are all online, we discuss the principles that Europe has been deciding upon to harmonize and integrate them better and make better use of the resources we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, team.